Right, LOP Pods, for your delectation, straight from the government website, we've got the discussion around the school's guidance, which is quite interesting. You want to see what's going on here. So have a watch and see where you are with it. Yeah. I'll say something at the end, but you go and watch it and then you can tell me what you think in the Dubras. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary of State, for coming today. And I think we should start on the positives. The rise in international league tables is a fantastic achievement, and since 2010 to go from 68% to 90% scores between good and outstanding is excellent. And I also thank you for the mention of Doncaster in there with working with regards to attendance. I think obviously we can't do anything with children unless they're actually in school.
Yep.
I think that's hugely important. So I think the schools, from what I can understand with schools, there is an awful lot of good work going on in there. But I think schools having to deal with lots of other issues these days, which they never really had to deal with. And I genuinely believe that we put an awful lot on teachers that I believe parents used to pick up and used to have to deal with. And so, and one of these big issues, which you know I've spoke quite publicly on, is the transgender guidance and the relationship, sex and health education materials that we're having to deal with in our schools. So we're meant to be getting this transgender guidance. It was promised back in 2022. I just want to know where we are with that, because at the moment the press have briefed us that it's going to allow some social transition in schools with parental consent. So when are we expecting it, and are the rumours true?
Well, the first thing is we are very much focused on trying to get it out by Christmas. We did previously commit to summer, and we had to change that because it is quite a complex area. And really what we're trying to do with the gender questioning guidance, as it's called, is to help schools navigate this area, which is quite difficult, but within the existing laws. So we've had quite a lot of legal inputs as well. The intention is here that this will be non-statutory guidance. So that's the legal position of this document, and it will hopefully be with you before Christmas. And if we, in terms of what we've been really going backwards and forwards and trying to understand is how these various layers of law all fit together, and how we can help schools navigate this with something which is legal but also useful and helpful to schools. In terms of your second question around social transitioning and with parental consent, I mean, obviously I'm not going to give too much detail of what's in the guidance, but I think it's fair to say that there are limits of non-statutory guidance, and and I know there's been other people who've called for not having any social transitioning in schools, full stop, etc. That would require a change in equalities law, and that would be a matter for the Equalities Minister if we needed to change equalities law. What we're dealing with is trying to get some guidance, because where we are today, we need to improve where we are today, because schools, as you say, are struggling to deal with this issue, but also a lot of other issues as well. So this is where we're at. It will go out for long consultation, because there are many people who have quite strong views on both sides of these discussions, and we want to make sure that we have that open debate. It's a difficult one to have, but we want to have that open debate.
And we now know that most children with gender confusion, given time and space, will grow out of it, and yet in contrast, if they are socially transitioned, they're more likely to continue on a path of puberty blockers, hormone replacements and irreversible surgeries. Children who go down this pathway can end up chemically castrated, unable to have children. Their bone and even their brain development will be disrupted. The full side effects and consequences remain unknown. This is an unprecedented medical experiment on our children. How can we justify the government, the school system, the very adults who should be safeguarding our children, be complicit in putting children on this pathway? Shouldn't all social transition just be simply stopped in schools?
So the first thing is all of those medical interventions that you talk about, puberty blockers, operations, etc. None of those can take place for children. That's for adults only. So there's no sense now that the children can get access. In fact, the NHS, I think, is reviewing in parallel, is reviewing its own approach and guidelines as well. But the medical intervention for post-18 anyway, That's it. So what we're talking about in schools, as you rightly say, is social transitioning, and that's why, and we're very clear that we want to make sure that this guidance is helpful to schools, that it ensures that this is taken very seriously. This is not something that can be just readily, easily done. There is a lot of careful consideration, but as I said, this is non-statutory guidance, and there are limits to what you can do. And if you wanted, for example, as you said, to just get rid of it altogether, that wouldn't be legal under our current system. You would have to change the equalities law.
Bringing laws for an awful lots of things, Secretary of State and the King's Speech brought in lots of things that we should do. But surely we should be bringing in a law then, if that's the case, to protect our children. And I genuinely do believe that these things start, all fires start with a spark. So no matter how big a fire we get in this world, it starts with a tiny spark. And that tiny spark can start with calling Jack, Jill, or she, him, or this, that, and the other. And it's starting within our schools. Now, it's one thing for a child to see some of this on social media, for an influencer out there wanting to sell an extra record or two, to do whatever they do. There's a complete difference between somebody on social media and an actual teacher socially transitioning a child with textbooks, which we'll come on to next, which say that these things are fact and say that these things are real. And do we think that the school system should be part of that? Because this can be absolutely catastrophic, not just for the child, but for the parents, for the family, for the friends of that child. And then also, because it's only guidance, and from what we've heard, it'll be down to an individual teacher. Well, so you could have a head who agrees with this, you could end up with a teacher who doesn't, so then you're breaking down that command of authority chain there as well. It shouldn't be down to an individual teacher to make that decision. There should be firm. It should be law that we can't do this to our children in school. Genuinely believe what's happening within our schools is, we hear so much about history. Children are ashamed of their past, they're confused about the present because of this, and they're scared of the future because of the net zero. And I've had letters from children at school, and they generally think the world's going to end. What are we doing to it? The core works that we're doing, with maths, with English, with science, we're doing some really good work, and yet we're bringing all this noise into this, and it's so damaging. And our job, more than anything else in this world as adults, is to safeguard and protect our young children, not to bring confusion into them. We must say no to this in our schools. We must say no. And I really hope, we've spoke before on this, and I know there's lots of other people out there who don't agree with me. I genuinely, I put my head above the parapet with this. This brings me no votes, this brings me no popularity, this brings me nothing. But I can't go to bed at night allowing a Secretary of State to sit in front of me today without telling them that what we're doing in these schools is completely and utterly wrong.
Well, first of all, never think you go to bed at night caring more about children than I do or the Permanent Secretary. Every single day, they're at the heart of everything that we do, every decision we make. What you describe is the reason why we are putting together gender questioning guidance. It doesn't exist today. We have drafts of it, but that's the reason, to deal with some of the concerns that you've raised. Now, I can't go into the detail what's in the guidance because it's not been published yet, but you will get to see the detail. You will get to have 9 weeks or so consultation, long enough consultation to get, as you say, you're on one side of the argument, some people do have views as well, and we will have to navigate those, as schools are having to navigate those at the moment, which is why this guidance, they're crying out for this guidance because they want to have clearer guidance. But as I said, there is a limit to how far non-statutory guidance can go within the law, and we've been trying to get to a point that we know exactly where that is. In addition, we've also got, as you say, the relationship, sex and health education guidance which was issued actually during the pandemic, and I think made statutory during the pandemic, which may be part of the issues that we've had with some of that. But that is also, we've had the independent panel who've reviewed that. They've given us their findings. We're going through those at the moment. And what we will be doing is we will be issuing updated guidance. I think in terms of the sequencing, we thought the first step was to get the gender questioning guidance in place, then on top of that to get the RHSE review, what schools could teach, by what age, make it clear, deal with the impartiality and contested views issue as well as part of that review. And then once we have those in place, then we will be holding schools to account on these. So there will be guidance that we will be looking to see how it's dealt with. We will be looking at, how things are taught, having clear age appropriateness guidelines as well. So I think these things put together will absolutely massively improve the system, even as far as your concerns are there. And I understand your concerns because we haven't got to the point where we've published these, but they will very much improve how schools navigate it, and also give parents a lot more say as well, and insight.
I mean, do you think we're getting so many of these children come forward that say that the gender question, because of some of the guidance, because of the RSHE materials that we've got out there? I mean, I've spoken with some of these publishers. I mean, some of the big four publishers. So this stuff is not... This material is not material that's been hidden from parents. This is material that you can buy from bookshops. And I've got one here. This is for 11 to 14 years old. And one of the first line is, your sex is usually decided at birth. Decided at birth. I mean, another thing, myth one, the world is divided into men and women. Myth one. I mean, this is what we're saying to our 11 years old. Truth. Everybody is different, whether they are trans or not. Trans women are women and trans men are men. This is for 11 to 14 years old that you say. And then you're wondering why we're having to bring forward trans guidance within our schools. We're actually teaching them this stuff to question their own supposedly gender. And then we're having to put... I mean, it's just... This is happening.
That's exactly why we're doing it, Nick. That's exactly why we feel the need to put in place gender questioning guidance. It's exactly why we feel the need to go and clear up impartiality and contested views. And it's exactly why a difficult job though it is, all of these, by the way, are difficult jobs, but a difficult job to now go through the RSHE curriculum and decide age limits and age appropriateness. That is exactly why we're doing what we're doing.
What you just said, Secretary of State, that is going to be after the gender questioning guidance. You said gender questioning guidance you want to get done before Christmas.
Yes.
Then the next phase would be the RSHE review, and that presumably therefore is early next year. Is that?
Yes, I think that's fair to. I mean, I'm not supposed to put dates out there, but I think that's fair to say. They've kind of been going along in parallel, but we do think that's the sequence, that the gender question first, because we need to clear up, as the honourable member has said, but to clear up, the gender question, because that guidance doesn't exist today, and it is something that you do find there's lots of people having views on, and lots of people question, how schools should be dealing with this. But we have to help schools navigate this within the laws that exist today.
Don't you think we should just remove all our RSHE guidance from schools as of now, immediately, so that we're not creating more problems for more children? And if we did that now, until we'd actually got the RSHE where we needed it to be, I mean, if you had a glass of water and there was 1% of it poison, would you give it to your child?
Well, I'm not sure what the poison question's got to do with this,
I believe that 100% of what we're teaching in our children in school is really good stuff. But this, what I've just taught you, I think is the 1%.
I think you've made your point. I want to bring in Miriam on this. I think we do have to focus here on some of the process and some of the policy issues, and I think your views are very clear on this, and I think will certainly been noted. But if I can bring in Miriam.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. I've been on a DL committee. Yes, on the guidance, absolutely, you're right. The schools have been crying out for this for a long time. So I think one of the tests of whether or not the guidance is successful is whether it takes the legal risk, essentially, away from schools and puts it on to the DfE. Because I think the situation at the moment is that schools are making case-by-case judgments on whether or not to allow a child to social transition, etc. And some, schools are rightly very concerned about the implications for them of getting it right or wrong, of saying yes or no. And I think what they're really looking for in this guidance is essentially to pass the buck, but very legitimately so, because they are not lawyers, they are not Equality Act lawyers, and they need to know in black and white that the responsibility for this lies with the government who makes the law, not with them as individual schools. So will the guidance, when produced, make very clear what is and isn't the responsibility of a school?
I think it's incredibly... This has been one of the challenges, right? Because I'm not a lawyer either, so I'm right up there with them. So I've been heavily reliant on the people who are lawyers. And there's a number of laws. That's the other thing. There are different sort of laws, and I guess you could at some point see that they're competing in some ways or not clear in some ways. But I also, don't have the power to control who sues who either. But of course, one of the things we're really keen to do is to make sure this guidance is helpful to schools. But there will also be judgments that schools will have to make as well. This is the case. But you put your finger on what does make it quite difficult, and why we've had to go round the loop several times, because we're trying to be as clear as possible, and something that will be helpful, but is also legal within the existing law. And as I said, for some of the things that if you wanted to go further, you would have to change the equalities law, and that's obviously not a question for me then. What we're looking at is non-statutory guidance for schools. It takes us much further on where we are, which will be good. But if there was a desire, or perhaps if we saw there was a more need, then that would be something that the Equalities Minister would have to consider.
Yes, I completely see that, and there are some quite strong competing legal arguments on both. So, but I think you've hit the nail on the head with the question about who sues who. And at the moment, the question that schools are facing, let's say a child comes with their parents' permission and asks to be, for their gender to be changed, as it were, in school. At the moment, the school has to take the legally precautionary position, because schools don't have unlimited budgets, as we know. They're not lawyers, they're there to educate children. So of course you can understand the head teacher saying, well, if I don't allow this child's transition, I'll be sued. And quite frankly, I can't afford to be sued. And I think they're justified in saying that. So really what the guidance needs to say is, if there's any suing to be done, sue the government, because the government does have the resources, not you personally, Secretary, obviously.
I was just thinking how many bits of guidance have been written that say that.
But if somebody wants to take legal action against the policies of the DfE, they may do so, and they will come up against the government.
Yeah.
It's not fair for schools to be a proxy for government policy, because they just don't have the weight to take it. So will the guidance make clear that if there's any suing to be done, as it were, then the Department for Education should be challenged and not an individual school?
I don't think that is where the guidance will go in terms of the legal structures. What we have, and you'll get this very shortly, and there'll be a long consultation, but what we've been working with is to try and make sure that it is legal in the first place. So, as you say, it's helpful, it's useful to schools, it gives them very clear ideas of where, for example, protecting sort of spaces for boys and girls, separately, etc. So it tries to be very clear, but in terms of, having some sort of, every legal case, here's the postbox, I don't think that's what it will aim to. It is non-statutory guidance, but we are trying very much, and we're very conscious of the fact that schools are struggling to navigate this. They are struggling to navigate the contested views between various people. They can see, actually, where this is happening in other places. It's becoming, quite litigious. We want to avoid that. We want this to help. That's that's a big call, because I'm not sure many places have actually tried to do this either yet. So we're kind of trying to push this as far as we can based on where we are with our existing laws. But this conversation just shows how difficult it is, and I always come back to it. This is non-statutory guidance. If the guidance wasn't helpful or didn't do any use, it doesn't have to be followed, right? It could just not be. So that's why we've been working to try it, and we've also been consulting with a few to make sure that it is useful to schools, and therefore it has to be clear enough. Otherwise they'll be like, well, if that doesn't tell me anything. And that's been one of the things we've been sort of going back and forth on. I don't know if you've got anything else to add to this, but there's no doubt it's difficult to do.
I don't think I've got anything I particularly want to add.
Yes, just one question, if I may. The consultation to come, once the guidance is in fact published, how will you ensure that heads, teachers, parents, pupils and students, maybe you're opening up on, can contribute effectively? Because I'm afraid that conversations I've had with all of those different groups, people often talk about feeling quite intimidated in this space. It is very difficult, very contentious, and hugely challenging for heads and school leaders most particularly. So how will you ensure that the consultation is actually open and people can engage effectively with it? Because those who've wanted to raise this issue with me have wanted to do that in a very discreet way for fear of the repercussions.
I mean, this is the challenge, right? I mean, it's we've seen the impact of it, right? We've seen people cancelled. We've seen it's horrendous. The whole discussion has really taken on to a new level. I mean, the consultation, we tried to make sure it's clear, accessible, it's available so we could get pupils as well as teachers, as well as everybody else who's got parents, an interest in this, and head teachers. But in terms of the consultation process and keeping it...
Yes, so I'll just say a couple of things. So, I mean, I think it's a really good question, incidentally, because usually what we would do in order to try and make sure we made a consultation as accessible as possible would be, for example, to run large events or webinars. And actually, I think that we should be really thoughtful about that in this case, because you will have people who will be very nervous about expressing their view in that kind of forum. I think we will do that, but the consultation response... So I actually think this is one of the few occasions on which a sort of boring government consultation response form might be rather a good thing. The form allows anybody to respond. It's not a particularly difficult process.
Does it require them to self-identify?
So it doesn't require you to, and it also allows you to say that you don't want your name or anything identifying to be used. So in other words, that you have an option of not giving your name. You also have the option of giving it, but it effectively being not revealed. So there's a couple of safeguards that are in there on that. And so we will try and do everything we can. I mean, that itself I think is helpful, but we will try and make sure people understand as clearly as possible the routes available to them to make their views known if they don't want to do that in a way that they're worried about.
And if the consultation were to deliver feedback that suggests that a prohibition or a ban, if you will, on social transitioning in schools was sought after for its clarity as much as anything else, is that something then that you would take forward? Because I understand you talk it would require a change of the law, but is that obviously a finding that you would be able to progress?
I mean, obviously everyone's going to be interested in what comes back, but for that, so if there was a change of the law required, then that wouldn't be my decision. That would be a decision ultimately. Well, it's the Equalities Minister. The Equalities Law, so it's not a law that's within my department's remit. So it's equalities. If there was a change that was to stay that, then that would require a change to equalities law, and that would be
ending of the consultation. If that was,
not only the consultation, but we also, as we introduce the guidance as well, and what happens, and we do need to make sure that we are. This is something that nobody here had to deal with like 5 years ago, right? There was very, very small numbers. It's something that's new, it's changed, it's created quite a lot of division in certain places as well. So we will, it's not just we're going to put it out and forget about it. We'll be very carefully monitoring, and we always review guidance anyway after it goes out, but we may probably be reviewing it earlier than the usual period, because we do want to try and get it right, and if there are things that need to be improved after that, my personal view is that from where we are today, this guidance needs to be useful and legal and helpful. If there's anything more that has to be done, then we need to consider that after this. But I think this is an improvement from where we are today, which is without any sort of particular guidance in this area. So I think that's the approach I've always taken, and I think we should therefore seek to introduce this. And then, if either the consultation or other facts emerge that's the right approach, then that would be something for the Equalities Minister to be considering, or whoever's responsible for the Equalities Law, which I think is the Equalities Minister.
We do need to move on, but I'd note, obviously, when RSHE was introduced for curriculum, I think the Equalities Minister and the Education Secretary were one and the same person, which is just interesting in terms of that change to a machinery of government that has taken place since then. But also, there have been a lot of calls from the sector for more specific materials and training for people in this space. Obviously, you now have at your within your reach the Oak Arms Act body, which is doing work on this. When do you expect them to be able to set out high quality materials for RSHE? And will those be publicly available alongside any sort of consultation on that?
They are definitely working on it. I don't know if we've got the data. Well, it'll be in here somewhere, but we are definitely Oak are working on it, and the date is, I think, just about to come here. I don't see a date.
Yeah, we haven't got the date in here. I'm sorry, we can write.
Thank you. Ian?
But there will be a full curriculum on Oak in this area, so that we know that there are materials that are in line with the government guidance, so that we can then start to point people to those materials.
Right. Can I ask Secretary of State, what has been done?
What do you think? I understand why they're doing what they're doing it, and the way that they're doing it is because it's quicker. Obviously, it makes sense to do so, isn't it? It's quicker than going through the old changing the law thing. My concern is Gillian, right? I don't think she immediately jumped in and said, "Oh, that's only happening to over 18." She doesn't understand the pipeline, is what I think, right? If she did, she would have said that. That's my only bit I'm worried about. But who knows? I mean, for goodness sake, we're just going to have to wait and see, aren't we? We're just going to have to wait and see. All right. I'll see you later.